She told me to my face that nobody would ever get an A on her final exam. She laughed at me, belittled me, and did everything in her power to break me. But by the end of the year, I watched her storm out of the principal's office in tears, and years later, she was fired for the very things I tried to warn them about. If you've ever had a teacher, boss, or authority figure who just hated you for existing, smash that like button, subscribe, and stay tuned. Because this is one of the most satisfying stories of karma finally catching up with someone who thought they were untouchable. The setup. Emotional pain. 9th grade. A year most people remember for awkward dances and bad haircuts. For me, it was the year I met the only teacher who ever truly hated me. She wasn't just tough or strict, she targeted me. Why? Because I was an athlete. 3 sports. Which meant I missed her class for games and tournaments. That was enough for her to write me off. Other teachers understood. Sometimes I missed class for math and science competitions, quiz bowls, things that brought recognition to the school. But not her. She saw me as a dumb jock, and she never let me forget it. Conflict escalation. Making life miserable. She would double our homework the day after long away games, just to make sure athletes couldn't finish it. She didn't check homework daily, only after those games. Imagine that level of spite. And when it came to grading, I'd get low 70s and 80s on essays, no comments, no corrections, while classmates with red ink bleeding all over their papers walked away with 90s. When I asked her about it, she didn't deny it. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're only doing 70% of your capability. They're doing 90% of theirs." So I asked, does that mean my paper could be better than someone else's and still get 20 points lower? She smiled and said, yes. That's when I knew, this wasn't about learning. It was personal. The straw that broke me. Toward the end of the year, she dangled extra credit. We had to attend a college production of Antigone, write a 2,500-word paper, and turn in our ticket and playbill. The kicker. The play only ran Friday through Sunday, and the assignment was due Monday. I told her for a week straight, I'll be gone Monday for a huge academic competition. She promised me 4 different times, just turn it in Tuesday morning. So I went to the play, I wrote the paper, I went to my competition, and I won first place in one category and second in another, representing the school. Tuesday morning, 7 a.m., I walked in proud and exhausted, paper in hand. And she refused to take it. She looked at me and said, "It's late. I never told you Tuesday was okay." I pulled up the metadata. It showed the file was last saved on Saturday. Didn't matter. 0 credit. I lost the time, the effort, and the money. Even my mom, who had to drive me all over for this play, was furious. But this teacher didn't care. She loved her power trip. She even bragged that nobody had ever gotten an A on her final exam. She wore that like a crown. She asked our class what our biggest wish was. I said, "An A on your exam." She laughed in my face and said, "Yeah, and I wish for $1 million and not to have to deal with you anymore." Turning point, the resolve. That laugh. That smirk. That's when I made my decision. If she wanted to play games, I'd play. But this time, I wouldn't be the one embarrassed. The exam day, the execution. The final exam was 100 questions plus a 5-point bonus question. Generic stuff. What did you learn? What was your favorite part of class? Students had 2 hours, but you couldn't leave until the first hour passed. I finished the exam in 20 minutes. So for the next 40, I let loose. On that bonus question, I wrote my heart out. I said I hadn't learned anything, because she never gave me feedback. I said my favorite part of class was it finally being over. I listed everything, the unfair grading, the extra homework, the broken promises. Line by line, I poured out the truth. When the hour bell rang, I was the first student, out of 110, to turn in my paper and walk out. And that's when everything exploded. The confrontation, her breakdown. Because on exam days, teachers don't proctor their own tests. She had time to read my essay right away. Minutes later, she stormed into the breezeway with tears in her eyes, clutching my exam like it was radioactive. She screamed at me to meet her in the principal's office. She even pulled my mom, another teacher at the school, out of her duties. So there I sat, in the principal's office, with my furious, sobbing teacher across the table. For 45 minutes, I calmly laid out everything she had done to me that year. Every spiteful assignment. Every unfair grade. Every lie. She cried harder with every detail. Finally, the principal cut through the noise. He looked at her and asked, "How much was that question worth?" She sniffled, 5 points. He shrugged and said, "Then just don't give him the bonus points." The climactic payoff. Justice served. I didn't need the points anyway. I scored a 98 on her impossible final exam. Missed only 2 questions. The next closest score. An 81. Her big victory. Denying me 5 measly bonus points. My victory. Proving she wasn't invincible. That her cruelty didn't break me. But karma wasn't done. A few days later, she quietly altered one of my old grades so my final average dropped from an A to a B. I couldn't prove it, but I knew. Here's the twist. The very next year, the school adopted a new grading scale. A 90 or higher was an A. My grade was officially bumped back up. And her administration started paying closer attention. She had to get all homework approved. She was forced to accept assignments via email. And just 2 years later, after more students reported the same abuses I did, she was fired. The teacher who prided herself on making kids miserable. Gone. For good. She thought she'd humiliate me. Instead, she humiliated herself in front of the principal, the staff, and eventually the entire school. I walked away with a top score, my head high, and, years later, the sweet satisfaction of knowing the system finally caught up with her. She wanted me crushed. Instead, she was the one erased. Revenge doesn't always come in one explosive moment. Sometimes, it's a slow burn. Sometimes, it's just telling the truth, and waiting. Because sooner or later, people who thrive on cruelty create their own downfall. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and tell me in the comments, have you ever had a teacher or boss who abused their power? And what happened to them? Subscribe for more stories where karma finally gets it right.